My water broke at 3 in the morning. The sound was small, but the silence after it was deafening. I grabbed my phone, called my husband. Once, twice, 10 times. No answer. The calls went straight to voicemail. That's when I knew he wasn't asleep. He was with her. So I called a taxi, packed my hospital bag, and prayed I'd make it there before the next contraction hit. He didn't pick up, but life did. If you're watching this, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because this isn't just a story about childbirth. It's about what happens when the person you trust most chooses someone else, right when life is choosing you. It started with a sound so soft, I almost thought I imagined it. A small, wet pop, followed by a strange warmth spreading down my legs. For half a second, I froze, my mind refusing to catch up with my body. Then I looked down and saw the dark stain on the sheets. My water had broken. For a heartbeat, the room stayed utterly still. No one tells you that sometimes, before the pain, there's silence. A silence that feels like the world has stopped breathing with you. Then everything came crashing back at once. The smell of laundry detergent, the flicker of the bedside lamp, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding against my ribs. I reached for my phone. 3:02 a.m. I called my husband. Once, the phone rang. No answer. I called again. Twice. Straight to voicemail. I tried again, my hands shaking, as another contraction wrapped around my belly like a tightening belt. It wasn't unbearable yet, but it was coming. Fast. I called a fourth time, then a fifth. Each ring felt longer than the last. Finally, the cold, robotic voice. The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. The sentence might as well have been a knife. Unavailable. I whispered to myself, "Come on, Chase, please." My voice cracked. I looked at our wedding photo on the nightstand. The one where he was laughing, his arm around me, as if he'd never let go. I dialed again. Voicemail. A tear slid down my cheek before I realized I was crying. I wasn't crying from pain. Not yet. I was crying because I already knew where he was. There had been signs. The late-night meetings. The cologne that wasn't his. The sudden showers before bed. The unfamiliar perfume that clung to his shirts. I had ignored them all. Because that's what love does. It blinds you in the most convenient way possible. I wiped my face and stood up. The sheets were soaked, the floor slick under my feet. I clutched the edge of the nightstand to steady myself, breathing through the next contraction. "Okay," I told myself aloud, like a soldier giving orders in the dark. "Okay, you can do this." I grabbed my hospital bag, the one I had packed 2 weeks ago. While Chase teased me, "Babe, you're so dramatic. The due date's still weeks away." I had smiled back. But inside, I'd had a feeling. I threw on a coat, slipped my phone into my pocket, and stumbled toward the front door. The air outside was cold, sharp, almost cruel against my skin. The quiet suburban street stretched endlessly under the streetlights. I called a taxi. The operator's calm voice was an anchor in my panic. "One will be there in 5 minutes, ma'am." 5 minutes. I could survive 5 minutes. When the yellow car pulled up, the driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, stared at me in the rearview mirror. "Oh dear, ma'am, are you?" "Yes," I said, gripping my belly. "My water broke. Please, St. Mary's Hospital." He nodded, floored the gas, and the engine roared through the still night. The city outside blurred into streaks of light and shadow. I sat in the back seat, my hands pressed against my stomach as if I could hold everything together. My baby, my fear, my anger, my disappointment. Each contraction came faster, sharper, like the universe was reminding me that life waits for no one. The driver tried to make small talk, but I could only stare out the window. Every traffic light, every turn, felt like another second I was spending alone, while the man who was supposed to be here was probably asleep in another woman's bed. At one red light, I pulled up the location app on my phone, the one we both had installed for safety. The small blue dot that was his phone wasn't at home. It wasn't at work either. It was at a hotel. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world tilted. I blinked hard, telling myself not to look again. But I did, and the blue dot didn't move. The driver glanced back. "You okay, miss?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just hurry, please." He nodded and sped up. Outside, the hospital lights appeared like a distant ship through fog. The sign Street Mary's glowed white against the darkness, and for the first time that night, I exhaled. I was going to make it. When the car stopped, the driver jumped out, running to open my door. "Hang on, miss, I'll get someone." He waved at a nurse near the entrance. They rushed toward me with a wheelchair. "Ma'am, are you alone?" one of them asked gently. I hesitated, my throat burned. My husband's on his way," I lied. They nodded, but I saw the flicker in their eyes. They'd seen this before. As they wheeled me through the automatic doors, the bright hospital light hit me like a wave. White walls, bleach, echoes of footsteps. I clutched my phone tightly, half expecting it to ring, half praying it wouldn't. No missed calls, no messages, nothing. They rolled me into a delivery room. The nurse checked my vitals, hooked me to monitors, and told me to breathe through the contractions. "You're doing great," she said softly, but her voice sounded far away, like through water. In the pause between contractions, I stared at the ceiling tiles, white squares dotted with small holes, perfectly sterile, perfectly indifferent. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. A new life, loud and certain, and I wondered if mine was ending in the same moment. Another contraction hit, stronger. I gasped, gripping the rails of the bed. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to scream. The nurse wiped my forehead. "Do you want me to call someone for you?" she asked kindly. I shook my head. "No, I'm fine." But I wasn't. Inside me, something was shattering. Not my body, but my faith. I thought about Chase's last words that night. "Don't stay up too late. I love you." He had said it so easily, as if love were something you could put on like a coat and take off whenever convenient. Another tear rolled down my cheek, but this time I let it fall freely. It wasn't weakness, it was release. Minutes blurred into hours. The monitors beeped in steady rhythm, a mechanical heartbeat filling the silence he left behind. And somewhere between one contraction and the next, a strange calm came over me, because I realized something simple, almost absurd. If I could bring a life into this world, without him answering the phone, then I could survive without him altogether. I whispered to the small life inside me, half laughing, half crying, "It's just us, baby, just you and me now." The nurse smiled faintly, thinking I was talking nonsense through the pain. But I wasn't. I was making a promise. When the next contraction hit, I gripped the bed, took a deep breath, and for the first time that night, I wasn't afraid anymore. Because the moment my water broke, something else had broken too. The illusion that I needed him to survive. The fluorescent lights above me hummed quietly, a sterile, rhythmic sound that didn't match the chaos happening inside my body. A nurse named Clara kept telling me to breathe, her voice calm and professional, like this was just another Tuesday night for her. But for me, it was the night everything began to split apart. I tried to focus on her voice, on the cold touch of her gloved hands, but the beeping of the monitor kept pulling my attention back to my phone resting on the side table. Still no message, still no missed call. I had sent him one final text. "I'm at Street Mary's. Please come. I need you." The words looked small and desperate on the screen. I stared until the letters blurred. Then another contraction hit, and my world narrowed into pain and sound. The sharp inhale, the nurses counting, the metallic taste of fear. "Good, Juliet, just like that," Clara said softly. "You're doing so well." I wanted to believe her, but my heart was pounding in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the baby. Something else was coming, something heavier. Between contractions, I caught bits of conversation from the hallway. A doctor ordering an epidural, a nurse asking for a chart. And somewhere far away, the sound of laughter, male laughter, low and careless. I thought of Chase's laugh, the one that used to make me feel safe. Now it made me sick. Another nurse entered, checked the monitors, smiled politely. "Any support person coming?" she asked. "We can set up a chair." My throat tightened. "He's on his way," she nodded, writing something on the clipboard, but I saw the look, that quick flicker of pity she tried to hide. I turned my face away. Outside the window, the night was thinning. A pale light began to creep through the blinds. Dawn. A new day. My contractions had slowed, giving me a few moments to breathe. I picked up my phone again, checked the time. 5:11 a.m. I had been here 2 hours. Alone. Then, suddenly, the screen lit up. My heart jumped, but it wasn't him. It was a notification from our shared credit card app. Transaction, Regency Hotel, 4:46 a.m. I stared at it, reading it again and again, like maybe I'd made a mistake. 4:46. While I was lying here, praying he'd call, he was swiping our card. At a hotel, I felt the air leave my lungs. The nurse's voice faded into static. The whole room seemed to tilt. I gripped the rail of the bed, steadying myself. "You okay?" Clara asked. I nodded automatically. "Yeah," I whispered. "Just dizzy." She smiled kindly. "That's normal. Breathe, honey. You're strong." Strong. The word echoed like a dare. I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. But somewhere under the panic, something inside me began to stir. Not anger yet, but awareness. The kind that comes right before a storm. I waited until the nurse left, then opened the location app again. The blue dot hadn't moved. Regency Hotel, room 214. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I could see him half asleep, her curled beside him, his phone turned off. The image burned itself into my mind, so vivid it made me want to scream. Another contraction hit, sharper this time, as if my body wanted to remind me that this wasn't the only battle happening tonight. I pressed the call button. Clara returned immediately. "You're progressing," she said, checking the monitor. "About 6 centimeters now. Baby's doing great." I nodded, but my thoughts were somewhere else. Can I make a quick phone call?" "Of course," she said, stepping aside. I scrolled through my contacts, hovering over one name, Lisa, my best friend. The one person who always answered. The one person who had told me, months ago, "Something's off with him, Jules." I hadn't listened. I called her now. It rang twice before she picked up, her voice groggy. "Jules, it's 5 a.m. What?" "My water broke," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm at Street Mary's." "Oh my God, are you alone? Where's Chase?" The question sliced through me. "He's not answering." There was silence. Then Lisa's tone changed sharper. "Awake now. Not answering? Are you serious?" "Yeah," I hesitated. "And there's something else. He's at the Regency Hotel." I heard her suck in a breath. "You sure?" "I just got a card alert." "Room number?" 214. There was another pause. Then Lisa said quietly, "Juliet, you need to focus on yourself right now. Don't do anything stupid. I'll handle this." "Handle what?" "Just trust me. Have the baby. I'll call you back." She hung up before I could ask more. I stared at the phone, confused, then another contraction took over, wiping everything else away. Time became a blur, nurses coming and going, voices overlapping, machines beeping. By 6:30, the doctor said, I was almost there. "You're doing beautifully," she said, adjusting her gloves. "One more push soon." I wanted to laugh. Beautifully. I felt like I was being ripped apart. And then, just as another contraction started, my phone buzzed again. A message. From Lisa. "He's here." At the hotel, I saw his car. He's not alone. My chest went tight. The doctor's voice blurred into the background. The sound of my pulse filled my ears. Then another message. "Don't worry. I took a photo. You'll thank me later." My vision swam. Everything in me wanted to scream, but instead I did something else. I pushed. Hard. Pain exploded through me, white-hot, blinding. Voices shouted around me, counting, encouraging. But all I heard was my own breath and the echo of those words. "He's not alone." Then, suddenly, there was silence. And a cry. Small, sharp, alive. My baby. They placed him on my chest, warm and slippery, and for a moment, everything else vanished. The world shrank to that tiny heartbeat pressed against mine. I laughed and sobbed at the same time, whispering, "Hi there, baby. It's okay. It's okay." But even in that perfect moment, part of me knew nothing about this was okay. Clara smiled, tears in her own eyes. "He's beautiful," she said. "Do you want to call your husband now?" I almost said yes. Then I looked at my phone, still glowing with Lisa's messages. I wiped my tears, kissed my son's forehead, and said quietly, "Not yet." Hours passed. They cleaned him, wrapped him, weighed him. The sun rose, spilling light through the blinds. Visitors came and went from other rooms, laughter echoing faintly through the hallways. I sat there, my baby asleep in my arms, watching the clock tick toward noon. That's when my phone finally rang. Chase. I stared at his name flashing on the screen. I could almost hear his excuses already. Sorry, my phone died. I was working late. You know how it is. My finger hovered over the green button. Then I let it ring out. For the first time, I was the one who didn't answer. When it stopped, I exhaled slowly, looked at my son, and whispered, "That was your first sign, little one. The first sign that sometimes silence says more than words ever could." The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and sunlight. Morning light spilled through the blinds, washing everything in soft gold. My son slept in the clear plastic crib beside me, his tiny chest rising and falling with the rhythm of new life. For a few minutes, I allowed myself to watch him, pretending the world outside that window didn't exist. Then my phone buzzed. I looked down, half hoping it was Chase. It wasn't. It was Lisa. One photo. No words. Just a picture. My thumb hovered before opening it, as if the act of seeing would make it real. When I finally tapped the image, it took a second to load. Then it appeared blurry, but unmistakable. Chase, shirtless, standing on a hotel balcony, a towel slung around his waist, and next to him, a woman, younger, barefoot. Her face turned just enough toward the camera that I could see the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw. My breath caught. I knew that face. It was Hannah, my daughter-in-law. My mind refused to process it. For a moment, I thought I might throw up. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to change, for the universe to correct itself, to tell me I was wrong. But it didn't. It just sat there, a frozen image of betrayal layered over everything I thought I knew about my life. Hannah, my son's wife, the girl who'd called me mom, the one who'd asked for my lasagna recipe and texted me pictures of baby clothes, the one who was supposed to be part of our family, not the reason it collapsed. The room swayed. I clutched the edge of the bed, trying to breathe. A nurse walked in, cheerful and unaware. "Time for vitals," she sang, rolling a cart toward me. I nodded numbly, forcing a smile. She checked my blood pressure, fussed over the baby, made small talk about how handsome he was. I nodded, answered automatically, my voice mechanical. Inside, everything was burning. When she left, I picked up my phone again, staring at that photo. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart, as if the image could stop meaning what it clearly meant. Then I scrolled up another message from Lisa. "I'm sorry, Jules. I didn't know it was her. Neither did I." I sat there, staring at the wall, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Memories began flashing through my mind like a film reel on fire. Hannah and Chase laughing together at family dinners, their heads too close. The way she'd once brushed his shoulder when she thought no one was looking. The time my son, Daniel, mentioned Chase had been helping her with some legal stuff. I had thought nothing of it. I had trusted him. And her. God, I had trusted both of them. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to shut it out, but the images kept coming. I thought of Daniel, my son, serving overseas, oblivious. He had trusted her, too. How would I ever tell him? Could I tell him? Or would this secret rot us all from the inside out? My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Chase. I stared at his name flashing on the screen, a wave of nausea washing over me. I didn't answer. He called again, and again. The fourth time, I picked up. I didn't speak. "Juliet?" His voice sounded cautious, rehearsed. "Hey, honey. I just saw your texts. My phone died last night. Are you okay? Did you?" "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't lie to me." There was silence, then a nervous laugh. "What?" "Lie about what?" "The Regency Hotel," I said. I heard the breath catch in his throat. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Room 214. Silence. Then, "Juliet, you're emotional. You just gave birth. You're probably confused." "She's my daughter-in-law, Chase." The words dropped like glass hitting tile. He didn't respond. I could hear him breathing fast, shallow. "Say something," I whispered. Still nothing. Then he hung up, just like that. The sound of the disconnected line rang in my ears, sharp as a scream. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at it as if it were something dangerous. My baby stirred in his crib, making a small, soft sound, a whimper that pulled me back into my body. I reached for him, lifted him gently into my arms, held him close. His skin smelled like milk and new beginnings. I pressed my lips to his forehead and whispered, "You didn't deserve this world, little one. But I promise you, I'll make it better." As I rocked him, the tears finally came quiet, steady, unstoppable. They weren't just for Chase or Hannah or even Daniel. They were for the version of me that had died somewhere between that hotel receipt and the hang-up tone. Later, when the nurse came to check on us, she asked if I wanted to list the father's name on the birth certificate. I hesitated, then I said, yes, Chase Whitman. My voice didn't shake. Not because I forgave him, but because I refused to let him erase me. That night, when the ward was quiet and the world had gone gray again, I looked out the window at the city lights. Every building shimmered with life, stories unfolding behind 1,000 curtains. Somewhere out there, he was with her. I could picture it. Panic, excuses, maybe even a fight. He'd probably promised to end it, to come clean, to fix everything. But I knew better. People like Chase didn't fix things. They buried them. And I'd been buried long enough. I opened my notes app and started typing. Not a message, a list. Every detail I remembered. The date, the hotel, the transaction time, the photo, evidence. For Daniel, someday. For me, for court, maybe. For the truth. By the time I finished, dawn had turned into full morning again. The nurse brought breakfast eggs, toast, juice. I ate quietly, mechanically, feeding my body because my mind was already elsewhere. My son stirred beside me, and I reached for his tiny hand. It curled instinctively around my finger. You and me, I whispered again. We're going to start over. My phone buzzed once more. Another text, this one from an unknown number. We need to talk. H. My stomach turned to ice. She dared. My thumb hovered above the screen. I didn't reply. Not yet. I turned the phone face down, closed my eyes, and let the quiet settle around me. Beneath the steady beep of the monitor, I heard my own heart beating slower, stronger. That was the moment I understood I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was awake. I had seen the hidden world behind the life I thought I had, and there was no unseeing it. From now on, I wasn't the woman calling for help. I was the woman taking notes. By the time they discharged me, the sky was gray and swollen with rain. I held my baby in one arm and the paperwork in the other, walking slowly toward the hospital doors. Every muscle in my body ached, but the ache was different now. It wasn't just from birth, it was from waking up. Chase wasn't waiting outside. I didn't expect him to be. A nurse offered to call someone to pick me up, and I smiled politely, lying again. My husband's on his way. She nodded with that same gentle pity I'd come to recognize. I stepped into the damp air alone. The taxi driver from that night, the same man, by some twist of fate, recognized me when he pulled up. "Congratulations, ma'am," he said softly. "You did it." I managed a small smile. "Yeah," I said. "I did." The ride home was silent, except for the steady hum of the tires on wet asphalt. My son slept in the car seat beside me, and I couldn't stop watching him. There was so much peace in his tiny face. I wondered what kind of world I was bringing him into, one built on lies, or one I could rebuild myself. When the car stopped in front of the house, I hesitated. I had lived there for 12 years. Every flower in the garden, every photo on the wall had been a piece of us. But now the windows looked like eyes watching me, or maybe warning me. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it. The same unmade bed, the same faint smell of his cologne. I carried the baby upstairs, laid him in the crib I had decorated by myself, then walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. The house was too quiet. I turned on the kettle just for the noise. The water hissed as it boiled, and I stared at the steam curling upward, thinking of all the times Chase had filled this kitchen with laughter and promises. Now it was just me, the steam, and the faint hum of anger beginning to boil underneath it all. My phone vibrated. A message from him. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. Then another. "Please, Juliet, let me explain." I stared at the screen. There it was, the start of his performance. Guilt, excuses, maybe tears. I knew how this play went. I'd written half the lines myself over the years, covering for him, softening the truth. Not this time. I opened my laptop instead, logged into our bank account, transactions, deposits, withdrawals, all lined up neatly like a map of his betrayal. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases I'd never seen. I took screenshots of everything. Evidence, neatly organized in a folder labeled July Statements. Then, I opened another document and began typing a list. lawyer, custody, asset division, prenuptial clause. Words that once terrified me now felt like tools, not revenge precision. I remembered something my father used to say: if someone betrays you, don't raise your voice, raise your value. I smiled faintly. Maybe it was time to do both. Around noon, Chase came home. The sound of his key in the lock made my stomach twist, but I didn't move from the kitchen table. He stepped inside, his voice tentative. "Jules?" I didn't answer. He followed the sound of the kettle still hissing and stopped when he saw me. "You're home," he said, like it was a surprise. "How's the baby?" "Sleeping," I said flatly. "You should go see him. It might be the last quiet moment you get with him for a while." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" I took a sip of water, savoring the silence before I spoke. "It means I know about the hotel. And Hannah." The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "Don't. I don't want a performance." "Juliet, it's not. Don't." The word came out sharper than I expected. For once, he obeyed it. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. Then he said quietly, "Who told you?" "She didn't have to," I said. "You paid for the room with our card." His mouth opened, closed. Then he tried to smile, the same smile that used to get him out of speeding tickets and fights and guilt. "It didn't work this time. I made a mistake," he said. "You think?" I turned back to the kettle, switched it off. "You slept with your son's wife, Chase. That's not a mistake. That's a demolition." "It's not like that," he said quickly. We were drunk. It was one time. Don't lie again," I said softly. "I've seen the photos." He froze. His throat bobbed. "Who? Doesn't matter who. What matters is what happens next." I looked him in the eye then, really looked. For years, I'd seen the charming husband, the provider, the man who made everyone laugh. Now I saw the truth, a man so terrified of being ordinary that he'd destroy his own family to feel alive. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice trembling. "We can fix it, for the baby." "The baby will be fine," I said, "because I'll make sure of it." I picked up my phone, opened the folder of screenshots, turned the screen toward him. "This is what you left behind, Chase." A digital breadcrumb trail of arrogance. His eyes darted across the images, hotel bills, messages, timestamps. "You're not the first man to forget the cloud backs up everything," I added. He looked at me, truly frightened now. "What are you going to do?" I smiled, small, cold. "Nothing yet." That was the moment he realized I wasn't bluffing. That I wasn't the same woman who begged him to come home, who cried when he worked late, who believed every apology. "Juliet," he said carefully, "we can talk to someone. Therapy, maybe." "You should have thought of therapy before undressing your daughter-in-law," I said, cutting him off. He winced, as if the words themselves had weight. "I'll leave," he muttered. "Maybe that's best." "Maybe," I agreed. He turned to go, but I added, "Oh, and Chase?" He stopped in the doorway. "Yes? If you're going to run to her, tell her to get a lawyer too." His shoulders tensed. Then he left without another word. When the door closed, the silence felt different, not empty, but clean. I looked out the window. The rain had started again, steady and soft. I went upstairs, checked on my baby, and whispered, "We're safe now." I didn't know if it was true yet, but saying it made it feel closer. That night, as I rocked him to sleep, I opened my phone one last time. Hannah's message from before, "We need to talk." I finally replied, "Soon," because I had made my decision. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make sure every single person who broke our family understood exactly what it meant to lose something real. The next morning, the house felt eerily calm, like the quiet before a courtroom verdict. Rain tapped against the windows in thin silver lines. I made coffee, fed the baby, and looked out into the gray world beyond the glass. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and a pen, the same table where Chase once read the newspaper, where we once planned vacations, where we once pretended our marriage still meant something. Now it was my war room. I opened the notebook and wrote the first line in clean, steady handwriting. Plan. Take back everything he stole. I didn't mean money. I meant peace. I meant control. I meant myself. Step 1 was simple. Information. In betrayal, knowledge is the only currency that holds value. I logged into his email. The password was still the same. My birthday. The irony was almost insulting. Inside were dozens of unread messages from clients, but one thread caught my eye: HW real estate transfer. My heart stopped for a moment before I opened it. It was a conversation between Chase and our family lawyer discussing the sale of one of our rental properties, a beachfront home we'd owned for years. Except the buyer's name was Hannah Walker, my daughter-in-law. My mouth went dry. The sale had gone through 2 weeks ago. The payment, $680,000, had been wired into his personal account, not our joint one. He had sold it to her quietly, under a shell company. My pulse steadied. This wasn't just infidelity. This was theft. I scrolled further and found more paperwork, digital signatures, a lawyer's copy of the deed, all legal, all hidden from me. Step 2 was even simpler: backup. I downloaded every file, printed copies, and placed them in a folder labeled Medical Documents, Irony, again. Then I called the bank. The woman on the line confirmed what I already knew. Chase had been moving assets around for months. "Would you like to freeze the joint accounts, Mrs. Whitman?" she asked politely. "Not yet," I said. "I'll let you know," because freezing them now would warn him. And I wasn't ready for him to know that I knew everything. Not yet. That afternoon, he texted, "Can we talk? I'll come by tonight." I stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Fine." 7 p.m. I cleaned the kitchen, not because it mattered, but because it gave my hands something to do. Every movement felt deliberate: wiping the counter, arranging the chairs, setting the stage. I even made dinner, the same meal I used to cook when he came home late from work. Old habits have their uses. They make deception easier. At 7:03, the doorbell rang. He came in, hair damp from the rain, wearing that same look guilt rehearsed as sorrow. "You look good," he said softly. I didn't respond. He sat down across from me. "Juliet," he began, "I've been thinking about everything, about us. I made mistakes." "Stop saying mistakes," I cut in. "They're choices. You chose her. You chose to sell our property to her. You chose to use my son's marriage as your playground." His face went white. "How do you—" "I told you," I said calmly. "The cloud remembers everything." He leaned back, exhaling. "Okay, you want the truth? Fine. She came to me. She was lonely. Daniel's been away for months, you know that. It just happened." "It didn't just happen," I said quietly. "You signed contracts. You opened accounts. You built an entire second life on my silence." He looked at me, realizing I wasn't yelling. That scared him more than if I had. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally. "Money? The house?" "Neither," I said. "I want time." "Time? Time to think, to plan, to make sure I do this right." He frowned. "Do what right?" I smiled faintly. "You'll see." After he left, I waited 10 minutes, then made my next call. "Lisa," I said when she answered, "I need a favor. Anything. You still have that friend who works at the law firm downtown? The one who handles asset transfers?" "Yeah." "Good. Tell her I'll pay double for discretion." Lisa paused. "Juliet, what are you doing?" "Taking back my name," I said. Over the next few days, I moved quietly. I signed nothing, argued with no one, answered his texts with one-word replies. Chase mistook it for weakness. He thought silence meant surrender. He didn't understand it was strategy. I met Lisa's contact, a sharp woman named Evelyn who wore red lipstick like armor. We met in a cafe on the east side of town. "You're Mrs. Whitman?" she asked. "For now," I said. Evelyn smiled. "I like you already." We went over documents for 2 hours. She explained what could be reversed, what couldn't. "He's been transferring assets," she said, flipping through the pages. "Sloppy work. Probably thought you'd never look." "He was right," I said. "Until now." She looked up at me. "You know, most women cry in these meetings." "I already did that," I said. "Now I'm taking notes." Evelyn grinned. "Then let's make him regret underestimating you." That night, I returned home and found Chase sitting on the porch, drenched in rain, waiting. "We can fix this," he said again, his voice cracking. "We can't," I said simply. "It's already fixed, just not the way you think." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done being part of your story," I said, unlocking the door. "From now on, you're part of mine." He stood there, speechless, as I walked inside and closed the door behind me. Upstairs, the baby stirred, and I went to him, picking him up carefully. His tiny fingers curled around mine, grounding me. "We're almost free," I whispered. Downstairs, I heard the faint sound of Chase's car starting, then fading into the distance. I turned off the lights, stood by the window, and watched the rain slide down the glass. Every drop felt like punctuation to a sentence I was finally finishing. This was no longer about pain or forgiveness. This was about precision. He thought I'd fall apart. He thought wrong. I didn't fall, I pivoted. The invitation came from him, of course. A desperate gesture wrapped in good manners. "Come to my birthday dinner," the message said. "Let's put the past behind us." I read it twice, then laughed quietly. Behind us? He didn't even know how far ahead I was. I replied with one word. "Sure." Lisa raised an eyebrow when I told her. "You're actually going?" "Of course," I said. Every magician needs an audience. The dinner was set at his favorite restaurant, the kind of place with dim lights, expensive wine, and people who speak softly because they think it makes them important. I wore a dark green dress, the same one he'd once said made me look dangerous. I didn't correct him then. Tonight, I wouldn't need to. When I arrived, Chase was already there, smiling too widely, a hand nervously smoothing his tie. Hannah was there too. She shouldn't have been, but of course she was. Her hair was curled, her lips painted the same shade of apology she always wore. "Juliet," Chase said warmly, as if we were old friends. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," I said, my voice calm. "Happy birthday." I handed him a small box wrapped perfectly, understated. He looked surprised. "You didn't have to." "Oh, I insist," I said, smiling. He set it aside, visibly relieved that I hadn't made a scene. Poor man. The restaurant filled with chatter and the clink of cutlery. Lisa sat beside me, pretending to sip her drink while scanning the room like a silent accomplice. I watched them, Chase and Hannah, playing their roles, the charming man, the polite guest. Their laughter was just a touch too forced, their eye contact too fleeting. I could see guilt simmering beneath their smiles. Perfect. When the waiter brought out the main course, Chase raised his glass. "To family," he said, his voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. "To forgiveness." I raised my own glass, the corners of my mouth curling. "To truth," I said softly. He blinked, confused, but clinked glasses anyway. The sound echoed louder than it should have. A few minutes later, I reached into my purse and placed an envelope on the table between us. "Before we cut the cake," I said, "I have something for you." "Oh?" He smiled, clearly relieved. "Another gift?" "Of sorts." He picked it up, sliding the papers out. His smile faltered. "What is this?" "Deed transfers," I said, taking a slow sip of wine. "And legal correspondence between you and Hannah. You sold the beach house to her using our joint assets. The sale was fraudulent. By the way, the notary was under investigation. You didn't know that, did you?" His face drained of color. Hannah froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Juliet," he started, his voice low. "This isn't the time or place." "It's the perfect time," I interrupted softly. "You wanted a celebration. Consider this your moment." He looked around, realizing people were starting to glance our way. Lisa leaned back, crossing her arms, watching. "You don't have to do this," Hannah whispered, her voice shaking. "You've already done enough," I said, turning to her. "You should know Daniel's lawyer called me. He's coming home early." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't tell him?" I smiled. "Why not? He deserves the truth, don't you think?" Chase slammed the papers back into the envelope. "You're humiliating yourself," he hissed. "No," I said, leaning forward. "I'm freeing myself." The words came out like steel wrapped in silk. For a long moment, the table was silent, except for the faint hum of the restaurant around us. Then I gestured toward the box I had given him earlier. "You should open your gift now." His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside was a USB drive. He frowned. "What is this?" "Backup," I said simply. "Of every file, message, and transaction you thought you'd deleted. I made copies for the lawyer, the accountant, and the police, just in case you get creative." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lisa hid a smile behind her napkin. "Happy birthday, Chase." I raised my glass again. "May it be one to remember." He pushed back his chair, his voice rising. "You've lost your mind." "No," I said quietly. "I found it." Around us, people were watching now. The waiter approached nervously, unsure whether to intervene. "Everything okay here?" "Perfect," I said smoothly, standing. We were just leaving. I turned to Hannah, who sat frozen, eyes glistening. You might want to get a head start, dear. Daniel's flight lands tomorrow. Her lips parted in horror. How? Like I said, I murmured. Information is currency. I turned to go, Lisa following close behind. Behind us, I heard the faint sound of glass breaking, maybe Chase's hand knocking over his wine, maybe something else. I didn't look back. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, the kind of clean that comes after a storm has taken everything with it. Lisa exhaled, half laughing. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I smiled faintly. Then don't betray me. We walked toward the car, heels clicking against the wet pavement. The night felt lighter than it had in months. When I reached home, the house was quiet, except for the soft breathing of my baby upstairs. I stood in the doorway for a long time, the silence wrapping around me like a balm. For the first time in years, I felt steady. No screaming, no begging, no chaos, just the calm that follows precision. Before bed, I opened my laptop and sent one final email to my lawyer, Evelyn. The subject line read, "Proceed with filing." In the body, I wrote 3 words, "It's time now." Then I closed the laptop, kissed my son goodnight, and whispered, "We did it." Downstairs, the clock ticked past midnight. Chase's birthday was officially over. Mine was just beginning. The morning after the dinner, the world felt unnaturally quiet, not peaceful, strategic. The kind of silence that settles right before something detonates. I woke up to a dozen missed calls from Chase, 3 from his lawyer, and 1 from an unknown number that I already knew was his attempt to reach me from a different phone. I ignored them all. Instead, I brewed coffee and opened my email. There it was, a reply from Evelyn. The subject line, "Proceeding with filing, confirmation needed." Inside, she had attached documents. The official petition for divorce, property freezes, custody claim drafts, and the preliminary fraud complaint. I read every word, steady and slow. Each paragraph was a nail, sealing the coffin of our old life. I scrolled to the end and signed digitally, my hand trembling only once, not from doubt, but from adrenaline. Then I clicked send. That single motion felt heavier than childbirth. It wasn't pain, it was power. By noon, the first ripple hit. My phone buzzed Evelyn again. "Juliet," she said, her tone brisk but satisfied. "The filings are in motion. Court acknowledgement within 24 hours. The bank accounts will be flagged by morning." "Good," I said. "And the property transfers?" "Already reversed on paper. He'll find out when he tries to access them. You'll have exclusive claim to the primary residence and the joint investments for now." "Perfect. One more thing," she added. His attorney reached out. "They're unsettled. He knows you've got evidence, but not how much." I smiled faintly. "Then let him wonder." Evelyn chuckled. "I like your style, Mrs. Whitman." "Call me Juliet," I said. "Mrs. Whitman doesn't exist anymore." Around 3, the storm came. Literally. Dark clouds rolled over the neighborhood, thunder rumbling like an omen. Chase finally showed up at the house, banging on the front door. I didn't open it. Instead, I stood by the upstairs window, holding my baby, and watched him pacing on the porch like a trapped animal. His voice cracked through the rain. "Juliet, you can't just take everything. You can't do this to me." I almost laughed. Can't? He'd been doing things to me for years. I'd simply learned the language of power and started speaking it fluently. He shouted again, but I closed the window and turned on the lullaby mobile over the crib. The gentle music drowned him out. Later that evening, Evelyn called again. "We got a response," she said. "His lawyer tried to negotiate a private settlement. He's offering you half of the properties in shared custody if you drop the fraud charges." I let out a quiet laugh. "He still thinks this is about money. So I take it that's a no?" "It's a no," I said. "He can keep the money. I'll take the truth." Evelyn paused, her voice softening. "Juliet, I've done this a long time. I've seen anger, vengeance, heartbreak. But whatever this is, it's surgical. It's survival," I said. "And survival is never messy, it's methodical." The next morning, the story hit the local paper. Not from me, I'd never need to stoop that low, but from someone in the courthouse, probably a clerk. The headline read, "Prominent businessman under investigation for property fraud and extramarital misconduct." Beneath it, Chase's name, his photo, his perfect smile. The comments online were brutal. "How the mighty fall," one said. Another man who thought he could buy loyalty. Within hours, his company's board issued a temporary suspension pending review. He called me then again and again, until finally I answered, just to hear him break. "Juliet, please," he begged, his voice hoarse. "You've made your point. You're destroying my life." "Correction," I said calmly. "I'm revealing the parts you destroyed yourself. I can't fix this if you won't stop." "Fix?" I almost laughed. "You can't fix what you enjoyed breaking." He went silent. Then softer, "We have a child." "I have a child," I corrected. "You have consequences." I hung up. That night, Evelyn sent me another update. "Your motion for sole custody looks solid," she said. "And the court seems inclined to grant a temporary restraining order given the emotional distress evidence." "Perfect," I said. "He's cornered, Juliet." "You've got him," she added. "What's your next move?" I thought for a moment, looking out the window at the faint glow of the neighbor's porch lights, the rain glistening off the wet pavement. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'll know when I see it." The following week was quiet, too quiet. It was the silence of aftermath, the kind that hums just before people start whispering. My neighbors had stopped waving. Hannah had vanished completely. Rumor had it she'd gone back to her parents' house. Daniel, my son, finally returned earlier than expected. He showed up on a Friday afternoon, holding flowers and confusion. "Mom," he said, hugging me tightly. "I came as soon as I heard about Dad." "He's fine," I said, "just dealing with consequences." "Is it true?" he asked, eyes wide. "About him and Hannah?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," I said simply. "It's true." He sat down, face pale, and whispered, "How could he?" "Because some men mistake love for ownership," I said softly. "And ownership always breaks." That night, after Daniel went to bed, I sat by the window again, the house dark except for the lamp beside me. My phone buzzed another call from Evelyn. I answered. "He's folding," she said. "His lawyer wants to settle quietly. He's agreed to sign full custody over to you, transfer the remaining assets, and accept the fraud charge in exchange for confidentiality." "He's scared," I said. "Good, that means he's human again." "Do you want to accept the deal?" she asked. I hesitated, the first real pause I'd had in weeks. "Not yet," I said. "He hasn't learned anything. He's just trying to escape the noise. I want him to sit in it a little longer." Evelyn exhaled. "You're colder than most men I've represented." "That's because they taught me," I said. When we hung up, I went upstairs, checked on the baby, then walked to the mirror in my bedroom. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who cried on the bathroom floor the night her water broke. Her eyes were sharper, her mouth set like a signature. Somewhere between heartbreak and paperwork, I had become someone unrecognizable and unstoppable. I smiled faintly. "Almost done," I whispered to my reflection. "Almost free." It was nearly dusk when he came. The sun hung low and heavy, bleeding through the blinds like a wound that refused to close. I knew he would show up eventually. Chase was too proud to vanish quietly. That kind of man always needs an audience for his downfall. When the knock came, I didn't move at first. I just listened, the hesitation, the shallow breathing. Then another knock, harder. "Juliet," his voice called, raw and strained. "Please, just let me in." I opened the door slowly, not out of mercy, but control. He stood there drenched, rain dripping from his hair, suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but spiritually. "You look terrible," I said. He gave a broken laugh. "That's fair." He stepped inside, wiping his face with his sleeve. The smell of damp fabric and regret filled the room. "Sit," I said, pointing to the armchair across from me. He obeyed. For the first time in years, he didn't try to dominate the space. He just sat there, hunched, defeated. "I saw the article," he said quietly. "You didn't leak it?" "No," I said. "The truth doesn't need my help to travel." He nodded, staring at the floor. "Everything's gone. The company's freezing my shares. The bank won't release anything without your signature. And Hannah's gone. She won't answer my calls." "Good," I said simply. He looked up then, eyes sharp with something like pain. "Do you hate me that much?" "No," I said. "If I hated you, I'd still care enough to feel something. I'm past that." He swallowed hard. "You've made your point. You won. What do you want now?" I leaned forward slightly. "You still don't understand. This was never about winning. It was about ending. He frowned. Ending what? The story you kept writing for me, I said. The one where I'm quiet, compliant, forgiving. You built a marriage around my silence. I just stopped performing. He rubbed his face, exhaling. Juliet, I know I ruined everything. I was stupid, selfish, but I love you. I always did. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. You don't love people, Chase. You consume them. You take what makes them shine, wear it until it fades, and then blame them for the dimness. He looked at me for a long time, and I could see it, that flicker of realization, like a match lit too late. I don't know who you are anymore, he whispered. Good, I said softly. Then I did it right. He sat back, defeated. What happens now? You sign the papers, I said. You accept the charges. You stay away from me and from our son. You make peace with the fact that the only thing left of us is legal. And if I don't? Then I make sure everyone who ever shook your hand knows exactly what you did. Every investor, every friend, every woman who thought she was special. He stared at me, jaw tight. You've become cruel. No, I said, my voice even. You confuse cruelty with clarity. Silence stretched between us, long and sharp. Outside, the rain had stopped, replaced by the slow drip from the gutters. Do you remember, he said suddenly, the night we moved into this house? You painted the nursery yourself. You said it smelled like hope. I smiled faintly. And you spilled paint on the floor and laughed about how it looked like a map. You said we'd build our lives on it. I meant it, he whispered. Back then. So did I said. But you tore the map. He put his head in his hands. I can't undo it, Juliet. I can't change what happened. I know, I said. That's why I stopped asking you to. For a long time, neither of us spoke. It was strange. The quiet didn't feel like war anymore. It felt like aftermath. He finally stood up, moving slowly, as if every muscle had learned humility. Can I see him? He asked. I looked toward the staircase. He's asleep. Please, he said, voice breaking. Just once. I hesitated, then nodded toward the nursery. Don't wake him. He walked upstairs softly. I stayed where I was, listening to his footsteps fade, then stop. A few minutes later, he came back down, eyes glistening. He's beautiful, he said quietly. He looks like you. He'll never know you, I replied, not out of spite, but fact. He nodded, accepting it. When he reached the door, he turned back. You were right, he said. About everything. I thought love meant possession. I thought loyalty was automatic. I was wrong. Yes, I said, you were. He looked like he wanted to say more, but couldn't. So he just stood there, the man who had built a life on half-truths and charm, now stripped of both. Goodbye, Juliet, he said finally. I tilted my head. Goodbye, Chase. He hesitated, then whispered, You'll regret this someday. Maybe, I said, but I'll regret it on my own terms. He left then, closing the door quietly behind him. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was final. I walked to the window and watched him disappear down the street. His figure blurred under the streetlights, small, ordinary. For the first time, he looked human. I stood there for a while, hand resting on the glass, feeling the faint vibration of the rain's return. Upstairs, my son stirred, and I went to him, lifting him into my arms. His tiny hand brushed my cheek, grounding me in the only truth that mattered. When I came back downstairs, the house was still. I sat on the couch, the same one where I once cried, laughed, begged, and forgave. I ran my fingers along the armrest and whispered, It's over. Then I picked up the divorce papers from the coffee table and signed the last page. My signature looked different now, not shaky, not small. Clean. Final. I folded the papers, slipped them into the envelope, and set it by the door for Evelyn's courier in the morning. Outside, thunder rolled again. Far away this time. I leaned back, closing my eyes. For the first time in months, maybe years, my body felt light, not empty, just released. The morning after he left, the light felt different, softer, almost apologetic, like the sun was trying to make up for the months of storms that had lived inside these walls. I woke to the sound of the baby stirring in his crib, tiny breaths and little whimpers filling the quiet. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, letting the stillness sink in, the kind of stillness that comes only after destruction has finished its work. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Downstairs, the coffee machine hissed like an old friend clearing its throat. I watched the dark stream fill the cup and caught my reflection in the kitchen window. My eyes looked older, but steadier. The kind of face that had seen the worst and still got up in the morning. I sat at the table, the same table where I'd planned revenge, drafted letters, signed papers. Only this time, there were no folders, no notes, no noise. Just a cup of coffee and the hum of the refrigerator. The house was quieter now. His toothbrush was gone. His shoes, his jackets, his cologne, all traces erased like he'd never existed. But I could still feel the echo of him, faint and strange. Grief isn't just for love lost. It's also for the years spent trying to keep something broken alive. Every photo I passed held a ghost, smiling faces, shared moments, fragments of a life that now felt like fiction. I picked up one picture from the mantel. Us, younger, at the beach, his arm around me, my hair flying in the wind. We looked happy. Maybe we were. Or maybe we just didn't know enough yet to recognize the cracks. I put the photo back, face down. Around noon, I took the baby for a walk. The sky was a dull silver, the air crisp with the smell of wet leaves. The neighborhood had gone quiet. People didn't quite know how to look at me now. Some nodded politely, some avoided eye contact. Pity, curiosity, judgment, they all felt the same after a while. But it didn't matter. I wasn't walking for them. I was walking for air. When I reached the park, I sat on the same bench where Chase and I once talked about baby names. I remembered that day how he'd wanted something classic and strong, while I'd joked about choosing something poetic. In the end, I'd compromised. That's what marriage is, isn't it? A series of small surrenders disguised as harmony. I looked at my son now, asleep in his stroller, his tiny fists clenched like he was already fighting for something invisible. "You'll never have to compromise like that," I whispered. "Not for someone who doesn't deserve it." A woman sitting nearby smiled at me. "He's beautiful," she said. I nodded, smiling faintly. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added softly, "You look tired." I laughed quietly. "It's been a long year. Aren't they all?" she said, and we shared that brief, human understanding that exists only between strangers who know nothing and everything about each other. When I got home, a letter was waiting by the door, official, sealed, from Evelyn, the final decree. I sat down before opening it. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of closure. Inside, the words were simple. The court grants full custody to the petitioner. All property and financial claims are awarded in accordance with previous agreements. Divorce finalized as of this date. Just like that, a decade and a half reduced to legal paragraphs. I exhaled, long and slow. There was no triumph in it, just release. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine, the first one in months, and stood on the porch watching the sunset. The horizon burned orange and gold, fading into blue, and for the first time, I noticed the quiet beauty of endings. My phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. I didn't have to open it to know who it was. I read it anyway. "I'm sorry, Juliet. Truly, take care of him." I stared at the words, then deleted them without replying. Some things don't need answers. Some ghosts should stay ghosts. After I put the baby to bed, I walked through each room of the house slowly, deliberately: the nursery, the kitchen, the living room. Each step felt like reclaiming territory I hadn't realized I'd lost. In the mirror by the staircase, I caught a glimpse of myself carrying the baby monitor, barefoot, hair loose, wearing one of his old shirts. I didn't look broken. I looked free. I sat by the window again, same spot as always, the moon hanging pale above the quiet street. I thought about everything: the betrayal, the anger, the precision of revenge. But beneath all that, there was something softer rising, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It didn't roar, it whispered. Healing doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with dishes done in silence, with a baby's laughter breaking the gloom, with mornings that don't start in dread. It's slow, almost invisible, until one day you realize the air in your chest doesn't hurt anymore. The clock struck midnight. The house was asleep. I walked over to the window and whispered, "We're safe now," the same words I'd said the night he left. But this time, I believed them. I turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow from the hallway nightlight, the one I'd bought before everything fell apart. It used to remind me of fear. Now, it reminded me of light that survives. Before heading upstairs, I paused by the door where the final envelope from Evelyn still lay open. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a drawer. The chapter was closed, but my story wasn't over. I poured the last of the wine, raised the glass to the quiet house, and whispered, "To peace." Then I smiled. It was small, tired, but real, the kind of smile that comes only when the war inside finally ends. It had been 3 months since the papers were signed when he came back. I knew he would, eventually. Regret always finds its way home, no matter how long it's been exiled. The morning was calm, that soft, golden kind of calm that arrives before summer fully blooms. The garden had begun to heal the way I had, slowly, quietly. The roses I thought had died last winter were sprouting again, tender and green. I was trimming them when I heard the sound of a car pulling up, the hum of an engine I knew too well. I didn't turn right away. I finished pruning the last branch before facing him. Chase stood by the gate, hands buried in his pockets, eyes uncertain. He looked older not by years, but by consequence. There was no arrogance left in his posture, no sharpness in his tone when he said, "You still take care of the garden." "I always have," I said, brushing dirt from my gloves. "You just never noticed." He gave a small, tired smile. "Can we talk?" "I suppose," I said, nodding toward the porch. "But not inside." We sat across from each other, a small table between us, sunlight flickering through the leaves. The baby's laughter floated faintly from the upstairs window. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was strange how silence between us no longer felt dangerous. It just existed. "I didn't know if you'd even let me see you," he said finally. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But you came all this way. That has to mean something." He nodded slowly. "I've been in therapy, anger management, accountability, all that. It's strange, I used to think I was the smartest man in every room. Now I'm just trying to be quiet long enough to listen." "That's new," I said softly. "I deserved that." I sipped my tea. "Why are you here, Chase?" He took a deep breath. "Not to fix anything. I know better now. I just wanted to see you, to see him, to say I'm sorry, not as a defense, but as a confession." I studied him. His face was thinner, his hair grayer, but there was something genuine in his voice, not the performance he used to give when guilt suited him. This was quieter, worn down, real. "You hurt a lot of people," I said. "I know," he said, eyes lowering. "You, Daniel, Hannah, myself. I kept thinking if I could just start over, it would erase what I'd done, but it doesn't work like that. You don't get clean by changing houses. You just drag the dirt with you." For the first time, I believed he understood. He looked up again. "How's Daniel?" "He's healing," I said. He stopped asking why. "That's a kind of progress." "And the baby?" "He's good. Smiles like you did before you learned how to lie." He laughed softly, bitter, and fond all at once. "That's fair." I set my cup down. "You can see him, but only from here. I don't want confusion. He doesn't need it." He nodded. "That's more than I deserve." So we sat there, quiet again, listening to the sounds of life. A lawnmower in the distance, a bird calling, the faint hum of wind chimes. After a while, he said, "You ever think about what we could have been if I hadn't?" "Don't," I said gently. "What's the point?" He nodded again, swallowing hard. "I guess I just wanted to believe that somewhere, in some other version of us, I didn't ruin it." "Maybe you didn't," I said. "But we don't get to live that version." His eyes glistened. "You used to believe in me." "I did," I said. "That's what made it hurt. But believing in someone and saving them are two different things. I learned that the hard way." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You hate me?" "No," I said quietly. "You were a chapter, a painful one, but necessary. Without you, I might have never learned what peace costs and what it's worth." He looked down, breathing shallowly. "You always were better than me." "No," I said, "just quieter. Quieter people survive longer." We both smiled, briefly. It wasn't warmth, it was understanding. The kind that comes when you've run out of things to destroy. He stood then, slowly. "I won't bother you again." "Good," I said. "But you don't have to vanish. Just stay honest, wherever you are." He nodded. Can I send something for him? For his birthday?" "You can send a book," I said after a pause. "No toys, no grand gestures, just words." He smiled faintly. "Books were always your thing. Now they'll be his," I said. He looked at me one last time, and in that look, I saw something I hadn't in years, not charm, not manipulation, just sorrow, pure and simple. He opened the gate and stepped out, the sunlight catching the edge of his face for a second before it disappeared. I watched him go until his car turned the corner and vanished behind the line of oak trees. The wind picked up, scattering rose petals across the yard. I leaned back in my chair, eyes following them. They looked like fragments of something that used to hurt but no longer did. Inside, the baby started crying softly. I rose, brushed the dirt from my jeans, and went back into the house. Upstairs, he was sitting up in the crib, tiny hands reaching for me. I lifted him, pressing his cheek against mine. "It's okay," I whispered. "He's gone." The baby gurgled, oblivious, and I smiled. Outside, the sunlight poured through the window, spilling across the room in long, warm streaks. The roses swayed gently in the garden below, alive again. As I rocked him to sleep, I realized something quiet but certain. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for us. It's the weight we set down when we're tired of carrying their ghosts. When I finally laid him back down, I whispered, "We're okay," and this time it wasn't a promise, it was a truth. It happened 2 weeks after his visit. The roses were in full bloom, heavy and fragrant, bending under the weight of their own beauty. I was kneeling by the garden bed, pruning the lower stems, when the shovel hit something hard. At first I thought it was a stone, but when I brushed the soil away, I found a small metal box, rusted around the edges. I stared at it, heart tightening. It wasn't new, it had been there for months, maybe longer. The lock was old and loose. It opened easily. Inside was a folded letter wrapped in plastic, and a photo, the 4 of us, smiling at Daniel's wedding. I hadn't seen that picture in years. The letter was addressed simply, "Juliet." I sat back on my heels, the world suddenly smaller. The air thickened with that strange, still tension that always comes before truth. I hesitated, then unfolded the paper. His handwriting careful, almost formal. "Juliet, if you're reading this, it means I finally did something right, or at least honest. I buried this after the night you gave birth. You'll never know how many times I almost dug it up, or how many nights I sat outside this garden trying to find the courage to tell you the words on this page. That night, when you called me and I didn't answer, I was with her. I can't rewrite that, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know it wasn't love. It wasn't even desire. It was fear. Fear of becoming invisible, of being ordinary, of watching the years take everything that once made me feel alive. You gave me a life so stable, so safe, that I mistook peace for emptiness. And instead of facing that truth, I looked for chaos to feel something again. I told myself I deserved it. That men like me always get away with one mistake. But the truth is, it wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds small ones, slow ones, each time I chose my comfort over your heart. I remember the day you found out. You didn't scream. You didn't cry. You just looked at me like someone watching a ship sink from shore, helpless, certain, resigned. I think that broke me more than your anger ever could. Because in that silence, I realized what I'd lost. The only person who ever loved me without needing to be impressed. When you left that night, or maybe it was me who left, I thought you'd come back. People like me always think we're too important to lose. Then the lawyers came, and the papers. And suddenly the life I'd built out of arrogance collapsed in a week. You were calm through it all. I used to tell myself you were cruel for not crying, but now I know you were strong because someone had to be. There's one thing I never told you. The beach house, the one I sold to Hannah, wasn't just about greed. It was a place I wanted to keep near Daniel, in case he ever needed me. When she asked to buy it, she said she wanted to feel closer to him while he was away. I believed her. Maybe I wanted to. I thought it was harmless. It wasn't. I gave her a key to everything we owned, and she used it. That's on me. Not her, not you, me. I don't expect redemption, Juliet. I just wanted you to know that I finally see it. All of it. The way you looked at me when I told you, trust me. The way you smiled even when you knew something was wrong. You were the mirror I refused to look into because I couldn't stand what I saw, reflected a man who had everything and still wanted more. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't disappear when trust does. It just changes shape. Maybe what I feel now isn't love, but the shadow of it, the kind that stays even after the person is gone. You were my consequence, Juliet, and my lesson. You made me face the truth that every lie has a cost, and some costs never stop collecting interest. Take care of our son. Tell him he comes from both our strengths, not our failures. Tell him I tried, even if I failed. And if you ever find peace, I hope you keep it longer than I kept you. Chase. I read it twice, then a third time. Each word hit differently, not as an apology, but as an autopsy. This was not the plea of a man wanting forgiveness. It was the confession of someone who finally understood the depth of his own ruin. The wind stirred the roses beside me, brushing my arm. I looked at the photo again, Daniel smiling, Hannah beside him, Chase behind us, his hand resting on my shoulder. It felt like a lifetime ago. Maybe it was. I sat there until the light began to fade, the paper softening in my hands. For the first time in months, I cried not out of anger, not even out of grief, but something more complicated, pity, maybe. Or closure disguised as sorrow, the kind that comes when you realize you've outgrown the pain that once defined you. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the box, and buried it again beneath the roses. Some truths don't need to be kept on shelves. They belong in the dirt, where they can decompose quietly. I pressed my palms into the soil, feeling the earth cold and alive beneath my skin. When I stood up, the baby's laughter floated from the open window, bright, pure, completely unaware of the weight that had just been laid to rest below. I smiled. The garden smelled of life again, not memory. That night, I sat by the window with a candle burning beside me. I thought about Chase, the man I had loved, the stranger I had punished, the ghost I had finally forgiven. I whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for the lesson." Outside, the wind rustled through the roses. For a moment, I thought I heard a whisper back, or maybe it was just the petals letting go. The morning of his funeral, the sky looked impossibly clear, the kind of clarity that doesn't feel real sharp, too blue, almost cruel. I didn't go to the service. I'd already said everything that needed saying, in the garden, in the dirt beneath the roses. Death doesn't change the truth, it just stops the arguments. Still, I woke early that day, long before the sun, unable to sleep. The air smelled like rain that had passed hours earlier, leaving everything washed and new. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, the baby monitor beside me, and waited for the light. It came slowly, tenderly, like the world was exhaling. The first rays crept across the kitchen floor, touching the edges of the table where I used to sit, planning my revenge, my escape, my survival. Now, it was just light, simple, pure, unburdened. I took a deep breath and felt something loosen inside me, a knot that had lived there for years, quietly unraveling. The world outside was still, no engines, no voices, no phones ringing, just the hum of life resuming itself. I thought of Chase not as the man who betrayed me, not even as the man who tried to make amends, but as someone who had finally stopped running. Maybe peace was never something he could find in life, but perhaps he found it in the stillness he left behind. The thought didn't hurt anymore. It didn't heal either. It just existed, like a scar that no longer stings when touched. Daniel came by later that morning. He didn't say much, he never did when words weren't needed. He stood by the window, watching the garden, hands in his pockets just like his father used to. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I am," I said, and this time it was true. He nodded. "They said it was quick." "Good," I whispered. He deserved that mercy. Daniel looked at me, uncertain, as if waiting for anger or sadness, but there was nothing left to give, only peace. "You don't have to go, Mom," he said softly. "No one would expect you to." "I know," I said, "but I already said goodbye." He smiled faintly, the same way I used to when I was pretending everything was fine. "You really are stronger than all of us." "No," I said. "I just finally stopped pretending I wasn't." After he left, I went outside with the baby, now almost walking, his tiny hands gripping mine as we stepped into the garden. The roses swayed gently in the wind, full and red, the soil dark from the morning dew. I knelt beside the bush where I'd buried his letter and whispered, "He's gone." The petals moved slightly, as if acknowledging it. I spent the rest of the morning there, tending to the garden. Each cut of the shears felt like punctuation, small closures, quiet decisions. The baby laughed as he tried to grab a petal that floated past him, and I laughed too, realizing it had been months since that sound came easily. The world didn't owe me joy, but I'd learned how to grow it anyway. In the afternoon, I packed a small bag and drove out to the coast. It had been years since I'd seen the ocean, the same place where Chase and I once stood, young and unbroken, making promises we thought were eternal. The road was long, winding through stretches of green and gold, the sky wide and merciful. By the time I reached the cliffs, The sun was beginning to sink, staining the horizon in shades of rose and amber. I parked, took off my shoes, and walked barefoot to the edge. The wind tugged at my hair, the salt stung my skin, but it felt right raw and alive. I stood there for a long time, watching the waves crash below, their rhythm ancient and indifferent. The ocean doesn't care who you were, only that you kept moving. I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had led me here, the betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak, the revenge, the silence, the letter. All of it had been a kind of storm. Necessary, maybe. Cleansing. But every storm ends, and what's left is the quiet. I used to fear that quiet. Now it was the only thing I wanted. I whispered his name once, not out of longing, but gratitude. "Thank you," I said, letting the words disappear into the wind. Not for what he did, but for what he forced me to become. Strength isn't born in safety. It's forged in the collapse. As the last of the sun dipped below the horizon, the baby stirred in the car behind me, letting out a soft cry. I turned, smiling. "I'm here," I said. "I'm right here." Driving back, the road seemed different, lighter somehow. I passed the small diner where Chase and I once had breakfast after our wedding. The sign faded, the building closed. I didn't feel nostalgia, just acceptance. Everything ends, even the things we swore never would. When we got home, the moon was already high, silver light spilling through the windows. I put the baby to bed, then walked through the house one last time that night. The scent of roses drifted in through the open windows, blending with the quiet hum of crickets. I paused in the doorway of the nursery, watching him sleep, and realized something simple and extraordinary. I wasn't waiting anymore, not for closure, not for apology, not for love. I stepped onto the porch, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and looked toward the horizon. Dawn was still hours away, but the first trace of light was already brushing the edge of the sky, pale, soft, inevitable. The last sunrise I would ever greet as the woman who survived him. The first one I would see as the woman who had finally outlived the pain. I whispered, "We're free now." And for the first time, I didn't mean escape. I meant peace. The baby shifted upstairs, a small sound, the kind that fills an empty house with purpose. I smiled and stayed there until the light grew stronger, washing the world clean again.